Welcome, Alex. It's so great to have you back. What do you have for a topic for us today?
Well, as you know, Tammy, on these webinars, I've been talking about all the ways we can connect in relationships in addition to sex. As people, sometimes we equate the word intimacy with sex. So we're talking about the book I wrote, 40 Forms of Intimacy, and how sex is only one of the 40 ways we can connect. So there are 39 other ways to feel close in our romantic relationships, as well as other relationships or friendships. So anything that we want to take deeper, or get closer to someone, we can build that bridge to them by practicing many of these forms of intimacy. So today I'm going to talk about these forms of intimacy: acceptance, fun, recreation, and resting. So acceptance will be, it's a little heavier of a topic. It can be at times. And then the other ones I hope will balance that out, just being able to have fun, engaging in recreation together, and then resting. So I again chose to share about these four at the same time because conflict and differences in our personality, our thoughts, our approach to life and our relationships, it's inevitable, right? We're going to have conflict, we're going to have differences, and we can get stuck and stay stuck if we don't accept certain parts of our partner's personality and their approach to life. And we can, again, stay stuck. We forget sometimes that we need these other things: the rest, the fun, the recreation, because we're so overwhelmed, things can get tense. But I want to be very clear about acceptance. It's important not to accept behavior that is harmful or abusive. So acceptance doesn't mean, that's just how I am. You have to accept every part of me, and I'm going to continue to be mean or neglectful, or engage in these negative behaviors. Anytime we say or do something, we have to slow down and examine our delivery and our methods. So there's a lot of self-reflective work that we have to do here. We need to accept ourselves a lot of times, but we also, when we're in a committed relationship, and I always think the marriage relationship is the most difficult relationship on the planet because we're so invested in so many ways, right? Emotionally, often financially, just so many ways. So, but even though things that may come from our personality may be ingrained in us, we always have to monitor our impact on another person. So especially that person we're trying to build safety with, the person we're trying to build trust with, and intimacy. So acceptance, how I define it in the book, is enjoying and bestowing peace by accepting our partners for who they are. So it could be a peaceful exercise. We're actually enjoying peace, and we're giving them peace by practicing acceptance. And practicing means we're doing it all the time. We have our eyes on that all the time. So as I said, we're accepting them for who they are, not always what they do. And that, again, an important distinction, because we don't want to accept the behavior or accept the parts of them that are being mean, right? So, but sometimes people do things that hurt us, and we're human. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to create some type of harm for people close to us at times. Our hope is that we can, significantly reduce that as we learn more about ourselves, about relationships. And we can't accept the harm. We're not going to just tolerate, is probably a better word for that, harm, just because that's how that person is or how they have been, right? We need to be clear about how we need to request change, and we can do that. We can tell them, what you're doing right now is hurting me in this way, and you need to stop. But again, sometimes accepting people as they are, as a person, is really at the core of their identity. And we know we get together in a relationship, all those things that used to be cute and funny sometimes are not, right? They become annoyances. They become things that really hurt us, or maybe are pushing our buttons in some way. So we have to separate those things out, and look at what is part of someone's being, how they are made, and what is something they can change. So we all know that if we've been in a relationship for more than a few minutes, we can't change another person. So if we take on a relationship as a project, or a person as a project, and think we can rescue someone and form them into someone that we want, or person that makes life easier for us, we're headed down a dangerous path, and it's a very unproductive path. I realized this one time early in my marriage. In my belief system, I thought I was messing with God's work, my thinking he made my wife to be a certain way. And when I reacted negatively, or felt discomfort about certain things, what she was saying, how she was saying it, or what she was doing, it just hit me really hard, thinking I am like, this is the way God's made her to be. And I'm trying to change her to make my life more comfortable. And, we can't do that, right? We can't change people. So that's part of how we accept them. If she would only do this or he would only do that, my life would be easier. We have to really slow down and look at that. We definitely need to make these requests for safety and prevent harm, on the way to building intimacy, but we don't have the power to change another person at the core level of who they are. It's hard enough to change ourselves. We as an individual can make changes about us over time, and change who we are and how we do things. But to do that to another person, I think that's just going to be a constant, unproductive, painful battle for both people. So especially after betrayal, when we look at acceptance, we need to reflect on our values. And a lot of people that have acted out and committed infidelity, they've violated their own personal values. And that's sometimes something we often forget. Maybe they thought, I would never do this. I would never have an affair. I would never cheat and lie or do the things I've done to my spouse. And they feel that pain and that shame. So there's not only the betrayal trauma that needs to be repaired with another person, but there's also this deep reflection about how we have lived inauthentically. And that can be very heavy. It can be hard for a person to get through. I know I've mentioned this before, but someone who's been acting out and had an affair, infidelity, sex addiction, that they're working on so many things, right? They're working on how to stay sober, how to be in recovery, and do that many times per week. They're doing some kind of activity for their recovery. They're also learning, if they're in a relationship and want to stay in that, how to repair betrayal trauma. And they're often working on their own trauma. Most of them are probably going to have some kind of trauma, even if they can't identify any big isolated events. There is something that is in the background, and we're looking at everything, and it can be exhausting to do that. But so on both sides of the relationship, we have to see this as a delicate part of the rebuilding process. So, it's so easy. We get into life as an adult, we get busy with college, career, maybe building a family, kids, hobbies, all these other things that take our time. And we start to head down a different direction maybe than our core values and beliefs, and we abandon those. And so we betrayed ourselves in a way. So on the other hand, when we can live in congruence, we'll feel, as an individual, we'll feel the most peace, right? I am living consistent with my values, my words match my actions. I'm not 2 or 10 different people. I can be the same. I can be authentic, in these different environments and with these different people. So acceptance can also include our need to break down our preferences, needs, and wants. So talk about that in the book on acceptance intimacy, thinking about what are our core and basic needs. And that's an easy one, right? We need food and water to stay alive. So using that example of food, we need it, but if we want a certain type of food or prefer to go to this restaurant or make this type of food at home and eat, it's a preference, right? It's a want. It's not a need in that way. So we know choosing even what to eat and where to eat can be a cause for many arguments. It seems like that's one thing that can bring up a cycle in most couples is, I don't care what you want. I don't care what you want. Then you make a suggestion and they're like, well, I don't want to do that. And it can take us down that road and expose some of these underlying patterns sometimes. But when it comes to our safety and our sense of belonging, and to feel connected to somebody, we need to know that the person we invest in and share our lives with will be there for us in times of need, right? That's when we can count on people. That's what builds trust. So when trust has been violated, all of this is in question. So we need ongoing reassurance that helps us feel safe on a foundational level. And so one last thing on acceptance is our need sometimes to let go of frustrations, irritations, and annoyances. So we might have a long list of things that irritate us or leave us feeling frustrated or annoyed. So a couple practical things to look at is just being aware of what our partner is passionate about when we're talking about acceptance, and asking ourselves, are we getting in the way of their happiness or what brings them a sense of peace because of these things they're interested in? So can we accept part of that, or is that a constant argument, or are we making a little jab here, or if that's your thing, we kind of make fun of them or ridicule? But so how are we getting in the way of our partner and what they do to enjoy life and reset and do self-care as just part of who they are, but it's very different than us? So are we, being critical about it or making fun of them? So we're closing off every time we do that, we close off another possible pathway to connection to that person. We don't have to like every single thing they're doing or do it with them, but we just have to watch how we think about that, what we say about that, and are we having them start to withhold certain things because we have made that particular topic unsafe to talk about. So a second thing we can do is reflect. I think we should do this often on what are those things that frustrate or irritate us. And this could be anybody doing this, but especially our partner. When are we feeling annoyed? And we can decide every day that we're only going to let 2 or 3 things bother us, or maybe 1. So when we get frustrated and somebody pushes our irritation button or our annoyance button, and we can decide, are we going to let this be one of the 2 or one of the 3 things that day? Is it really big enough for that to count as one of them? And sometimes next thing you know, we found out we've let a lot of these little things go and realize they weren't such a big deal. So that can help with the acceptance part of just, managing that in our own minds of what is really worth talking about, getting frustrated about. Is this just part of who he is or who she is? And, are we going to have these same fights? Sometimes we could think about, when we're 20 years down the line, 30 years later, do we really want to be having this same fight? Or can we start today working on accepting part of these differences that create sometimes unnecessary conflict and sometimes breed resentment and really, I think a lot of times just have us feeling disconnected from our partner. So let me move on to the fun, recreation, and resting part. So these 3 forms of intimacy sound pretty good, right? I mean, who doesn't want to have fun? Who doesn't want to engage in recreation? And who doesn't want to rest? Well, sometimes we don't rest, but there are sometimes areas in our relationship that we forget or take for granted. So when there's conflict and distance in our primary relationship, even though we're working on recovery, even though there are a lot of things on our calendar, we can still make time to relax and unwind, and we need to. We can also make some time to put some things on our calendars that we find to be fun and interesting. One word that doesn't come up very often in recovery is fun, right? I mean, recovery is very serious. There are serious, very important, necessary things, needs, boundaries, all these things that have to happen. And there can be a time where humor is very much inappropriate or untimely, right? That could be very minimizing. Somebody's needing you to be serious and you're not. It could be a deflection. It could be, hurtful. So, but a lot of times fun kind of goes out the window with that, right? We have to be serious. We have to be, so focused on all the things in recovery. But, some of these things we have used to do, but, maybe we're overwhelmed and have just been in a season, a new pattern, new habits, and we've gotten out of the practice of doing certain things that we used to do that we enjoyed. So when life gets overwhelming, we don't really have anything to turn to, nothing on our calendars to look forward to this week or this month or this year, because it's so heavy, so dark. We can't even see sometimes next week. But when we feel this pain, sometimes having something on our calendar can help. But even when we can't do that, I really think we need to bring fun somehow back into things. And, sometimes it's individual, but at least recharging and resetting ourselves, that's part of what fun does. That's important. We at least need to do that for ourselves as part of our self-care package. So again, you might be in a different season than you have been, just depending on what's going on in your lives right now, but maybe you're just trying to keep your head above water. So what you're doing now and in the near future doesn't have to mirror what you did a month ago or a decade ago as far as fun, right? We change anyway in life, and our needs, our preferences change. But some of these things that you like to do for fun and recreation might be things that you do by yourself right now for a little while, or with a friend, right? If it's, for example, if you and your partner used to ski or golf or go on a beach vacation, but now that's triggering for whatever reasons, it's possible to look at ways you might still be able to duplicate those feelings, with those same activities or different activities or with other people. So you are still engaging in that fun if you can't do that at the moment with your partner. But when you can, I think it's important to start to re-engage in some of these activities with your partner. That's what builds the connection. And, even if it's hard to say the words romantic connection and to feel emotionally close because of the harm that's been done and, things you're working through, keeping some of these activities going in the background can give you some sense of normalcy, and might even give you a sense of hope to hang on to as you work on yourselves and your relationship recovery. So, going for a walk could be one of those activities that help you reset and connect. So it's helping you as an individual. You're getting some fresh air, hopefully, some exercise, and you're feeling connected. And just being near each other, walking next to each other can be a good activity, a good habit, good routine that you do maybe 2, 3, 5 times a week. And sometimes going on a walk, you can decide together in advance that we don't have to do much talking. We don't have to touch on all the heavy topics, right? Just be able to say, right now, let's go on a walk. We're just going to focus on enjoying the outdoors. And you might prompt that, just saying it's nice outside. And, I think I like to just look at the sun and get some fresh air. I enjoy being near you, but if all there is to talk about is some of the heavy things, and we're kind of replaying what we just talked about in therapy, the heavy stuff, and that can be almost an activity that you don't look forward to anymore, because we know every time we go for a walk, we get into long conversations and we're not ready. Sometimes you need to, sometimes actually that can be very helpful for couples. So I don't want to say don't do that at all. I'm going to say it's an option sometimes to say we're going to have a somewhat or mostly silent walk, and that, not a lot of words to say. It's just best that we enjoy some time together. And those things can be 10 or 15 minutes, right? Those little walks. I'll come back more to the resting form of intimacy, but, let me stay with the fun and recreation for just a little bit longer for a couple practical things you can try. So reflect on how you've had fun as an individual, what you enjoy doing. Think about what you can do to build into your routine, 1 or 2 activities, those things that you do alone or with a friend, but are healthy ways of having fun and kind of reset you, kind of give you some sense of purpose and a little break from everything related to recovery. So think about those things. Now, think about some activities that you and your partner have done before that you can still do. Some of these, again, things change over time as we get older, as we move to different places. We can't do the same activities, but talk about some of those together. What would you like to bring back? And take that extra step. Not only say that'd be nice or we should do this, but talk about taking the next step, making reservations or putting it on the calendar, clearing out your schedule, and try to fit that into a routine. If it is something you can repeat weekly, try to get that going so you can have something to look forward to that isn't going to be, as a serious or recovery related thing necessarily. It's a self-care thing, and it's a couples thing. So just maintaining some sense of connection alongside each other, in addition to all the seriousness of recovery work, I think is important to balance it out. We're not escaping, we're not minimizing all the very important work we need to do in recovery and in therapy, but we're also, right, we're also working on self-care and then couples connection time. So sometimes we're just so exhausted from the healing process that we can't engage in more activities. We can't add another thing to our calendar. So sometimes we just need to sit there and maybe watch a movie or something funny that can help us laugh a little bit. That's part of having fun. But I hear often it's important to remember that many movies and songs and other media can be triggering. So, any series, TV shows, movies that have, seem to have some form of infidelity. I hear this quite often, and different scenes in movies or themes throughout can be very triggering for both partners. So sometimes with that, just look back at the movies that you've seen before. Maybe one of those movies you've seen maybe 100 times, and you bring back some of those into your entertainment rotation, because that could be even VHS tapes. Maybe you have to pull a VCR out if you have one of those still. But these movies that you've seen, what's going to happen, and you're not going to have any negative surprises, right? So find some of these movies that maybe might make you laugh more than cry, but just something that is familiar, even if you don't laugh or don't feel like laughing. Sometimes just helping us check out of reality for a little bit and resetting ourselves for a little part of our day or our week helps us remember that there's a lot more to life than the pain that we're feeling. And we need to do those things that work for us. Sometimes people will tell us, you should do that, you should do this. And, sometimes we know what's best in terms of what's going to help us reset and do that. So let me talk a little bit about the resting form of intimacy. So some of us might do this very well, and we know when we need a nap and we can take one, and we know when we need to slow down and take time for ourselves. And some of us can't nap or, can't fall asleep during the day, or really find it difficult to slow down, or we run at a pace and fill our calendars where we've even forgot how to rest and rejuvenate ourselves in that way. So it doesn't always have to look the same, right? We don't have to train ourselves to take a nap. If that doesn't help or work for us, we could do something else. But I think we still need to examine how we spend our time, and we need to notice when it's out of balance. And we definitely need to keep our eyes on that, because that's, if you've heard about it, the PCI, the personal craziness index, those things that in Facing the Shadow, that workbook and different things. And we have our eyes on how our priorities and how our health and everything else kind of gets off balance. That can send us into, it can be triggering in many ways. So we need to keep our eyes on that for our own sanity and mental and emotional health, and also keeping our relationship a priority. But yeah, sometimes we don't know what to do with our free time. Like, it's so easy to pull out our smartphone and fill those gaps in between work or appointments. Sometimes we just don't want to be alone with our thoughts. So we fill that space. We start to ruminate about the state of our relationship and the pain we're feeling. So it can be difficult just to simply think positive thoughts or stay in a posture of gratitude. Yet during those times when we've had a few unexpected free minutes, it is good to think about a few of the good things in our personal lives. Even if we can't think of anything positive in the moment about our relationship, it's good to think about, as you've probably heard many times, gratitude and what are you grateful for? Think about, there might be a couple of things. If it's children, if it's family, if it's your health, like what are those things that are good that you have control over, that you enjoy? And just recalling those a few minutes here and there can sometimes give you that well-needed boost. So, but I think of the word self-care, and you hear that often, I'm sure. I try to also think of self-grace. So self-care and self-grace. So as I mentioned, our thoughts, we start to ruminate or spin sometimes, and that can have us feeling more discouraged or hopeless about our situation. And we're not seeing anything that is very hopeful at times, or about our future. So we can be pretty tough on ourselves sometimes. We beat ourselves up, and then we feel bad about everything that's going on, and even, those negative thoughts. We feel regretful about how we might blame ourselves for putting ourselves in that place. So self-grace is really just accepting ourselves for who we are. So back to that acceptance, giving ourselves permission to not be perfect, and forgiving ourselves. We're going to make mistakes. They're going to be things we put in the failure column. I think we have to be really careful with that word failure. But this could be on both sides of the relationship. The addicted person or unfaithful person can sink into shame, and they can stay there way too long. Right? We don't want to sit and stay in shame. Right? We can feel it, and we have to get out. We can stay there way too long. If we're there, we're trying to repair a relationship, and we're staying in shame. Sometimes a counselor might tell someone you need to sit in your shame, and that can be overwhelming. It's flooding, right? It's not helpful. Actually can inhibit how we show up to our partner and give them healing. We have to be able to show up. And when we can't even catch our breath because we're flooded and we're overwhelmed and we're having a trauma response, we're not going to say the right thing. We're not going to get that right every time anyway, but it's going to be difficult to remind ourselves of our worth and the good parts of our identity that we have just kind of lumped into, I'm a horrible person and I did these horrible things, but we have to separate that again from even if it's a series of destructive choices over years, we have to, as an addict, as a recovering person in that way, to keep our heads above water, we have to make sure if we are trying to help someone else heal and be present for them and show empathy, and that takes a lot of energy and focus and work, we have to be able to manage when we are activated, and that's important. So then as a betrayed partner, we might feel bad ourselves if we continue to yell or attack our partner because of all the pain they've caused us, right? It's legitimate pain, legitimate anger, but we know it's not helping. And we might have certain moments where we feel immediate regret because we said something and we're regretting that. So we also need to have self-grace to remember that what happened to us, we've been knocked off balance and off course so badly. We're grieving our past, our present, our future, and so much is going on for the betrayed partner that we're not always going to say the right thing. We're not always going to respond in the best way. Sometimes we're going to go too far and feel bad about it. But there's a lot we could do, I think, as a survivor from betrayal that helps us honor ourselves. And so both partners need to have some things that they do to rest, to relax, to reset themselves. Our mood, our attitude, how we show up is significantly impacted by our attention to our most basic needs. So if we're not eating enough food or healthy foods, if we're not drinking enough water, we're not able to function as well as we might if we're taking care of ourselves with good nutrition and adequate sleep and regular exercise. So resting can also take the form of meditation and just sitting in quiet. It's kind of an art to be able to just sit in quiet. We can train ourselves to do that. But this could be appreciating the beauty of nature. So you could be looking outside, engaging your spiritual life, through prayer or thankfulness. And, obviously, again, resting can take a nap, can give us a break. But, think about as a couple, what are a few practical ways you can rest together? So this is a form of co-regulation. You've probably heard about emotional regulation as an independent exercise. But when we can, regulating and resetting ourselves with our partner near us or next to us can produce a sense of connection. It doesn't take a lot of work. It doesn't take the right words. It's just being there and setting that up. Sometimes we have to initiate that and say, hey, I really, like that. So initiate it and reinforce it. I'd like to just kind of lie down next to you. I remember when we used to just sit on the porch, with our chairs and look at the stars or just stare at the mountains or whatever it is. And I'd like to do that. So you initiate that and then you do it and then you talk about it afterward. Like, hey, that was great. Very simple. I enjoy lying next to you. It was just, I felt close to you. And so that, and then, like I said, going for a walk could be sitting out in the sun, just soaking up the views, the sky during the day or looking at the stars at night. If you're relationship is in a place where you can spend time at a hotel. Maybe it's going to the pool, the sauna, jacuzzi, just to help get a break from stressful routines. So those examples of co-regulation are sometimes things we forget about. And we think we have to do this separately. My self-care is mine. And we need that for sure, but we have to work toward, I believe, if we're trying to maintain some sense of connection or intimacy in a relationship, that we are enjoying this form of intimacy together. We are connecting as we're walking, as we're resting, as we're having fun, as we're making plans for a weekend trip, or whatever we can do to stay connected as we're working on this recovery and healing process. So I hope you're able to pick up a few things today about the importance of accepting each other, and then also letting certain things go, maybe, so the pile is not so insurmountable, and also making time for fun and recreation and rest for yourself and each other, just to take some deep breaths from the heaviness of the work you're doing in recovery. So I'd love to hear from you, Tammy, if you had any thoughts, that I could take some questions for anybody who.
And we have both. I'm going to hold up your book, The 40 Forms of Intimacy. It's posted on our website as well. But this is a thick book with lots of information for you, all helpful tools to guide. When I went to treatment, my counselor told me she had steely gray eyes. Like, this is decades ago. I still remember her. And she said, if you don't make recovery fun, you're not going to make it. And I was like, and so like that was drilled into me really early on. And I think one of the benefits is to be able to take a look at, some stuff is tainted, so it's challenging. But what are the things that, because of my addiction or because of the betrayal or whatever, that, just never happened, or I've been interested in doing? So looking at and exploring new ways of finding fun, and they don't all have to be a success. You try, and so finding those things, I think is really important. I love that you're talking about, put it on the calendar. And I think put it on the calendar and commit, unless something major comes up. Don't let that be the thing, for the two of you that goes, well, that, just too tired, we're not going to do it, because that gets to be a pattern too. So I think like you were talking about, the intentionality of, how do we do this? The resting, I crack out. My husband is really good at that. He is like, he can do that little Zen meditation and, whatever. I am horrible at that. So for me, resting is different, and it could be walking, and I have to change my pace because I want to walk fast. And so I have to be intentional about walking slowly. And I am good at taking in the sights and sounds and smells and things, because I have a therapist who told me I needed to be intentional. So I do that. But the pacing, like, I find I have to, slow things down. If I'm just going for a walk to rest or rejuvenate, it's different than my power walk. So I love that you talked about a gratitude list. I think we always can find 3 things to be grateful for. They don't have to do anything with a relationship. They can be anything, that I have air and I have food and water today. That could be it, but that's a place to start. So I love that you talked about self-grace. I hear, and it's often from partners that talk about, I know I should have whatever. And I was like, who gave you the manual on how to do this, that you were going to be betrayed? And you were, so I think self-grace, no one knows how, no one comes to these webinars until they need to, no one has these skills. And so giving self-grace and I think should, removing from, I'm doing the best I can. I'm going to learn from things that didn't go as well. It's not a failure. It's an opportunity to learn and shift course. Can I adjust things and go, maybe have a different and maybe a perceived better outcome? Okay, I'll try that. And it's a try. And I do think the shame, first of all, when you said, if a counselor said, you should sit in your shame, I would fire that therapist, because, shame is a useless emotion. It is either self-serving, like, oh, I'm so horrible. Why, that's self-centered, but it's also, the spiral. Guilt can be motivating, like if I just ate the chocolate cake, I'm going to feel guilty and I probably won't do that again. So guilt can be motivating, but shame is just a swirly going downhill. So so I think that is challenging. Oh, the acceptance. So um uh let's see. I love that you talk about the delicate part of rebuilding. And like that, I was like, oh, that just, because it isn't concrete. Like this is such a, ethereal is the word that comes to mind, thing. And to just give it that space and preciousness. Maybe that's the word, preciousness, that we're working on building something, but it's delicate, and we have to be careful with that. um uh I had written down, I love that I'm entitled to 1 to 3 annoyances in a day, and that would have to give me the pause to go, is that worth putting on my list? And how important is that? And I learned that one, how important is this, a long time ago, because like things that I, just, this is, horrible and terrible. And then, really, am I going to remember this tomorrow, let alone next week? And it really isn't. And if it's a bigger issue, then that's something that needs to be discussed and communicated with. And if we can't talk about it together, then we need the help of a qualified professional to help guide us to navigate that, delicate piece, of the puzzle. But I really thought that was, because I'd have to go, is that one really one I want to, do I want to use up one of my annoyance tokens on that? Um, and I really appreciated right off the bat, you said the most difficult relationship on the planet is marriage, or an intimate relationship, a partnership. And I thought, wow, that's really true. It's also the most meaningful if I'm willing to put in the work on it. That's where I get that connection. And as you're talking about, intimacy is not just sex. And it really is that closeness and having that partner, at your side, moving forward in the world, sometimes right alongside, sometimes we're a little disconnected. But ultimately, if we're moving forward together, that's the richness, in life. I, I wasn't going to share this, but my father passed away late last year, and I have a picture of he and my mom, who were married 64 years, holding hands. Like he's in the nursing care center, and they're sitting there holding hands, and I'm like, they didn't do it perfectly, but they genuinely loved each other, and they did the best they could, and they had a lot of rough weather, to go through, but they kept trying, and I'm grateful that I had that opportunity to see them, to see them through the struggles, and to be committed to the process. But that's also an image that I hold for me, is I don't have to do it perfectly. I just have to be willing to be in the, on the journey. So,
Yeah.
okay, now that I'm crying.
Well,
Okay.
thank you for sharing that, and sorry about your loss. It's very encouraging, refreshing, inspiring when we see a couple that does that, and they're honest about that, they're committed, but
Mhm.
in the tough times, are they both able to stay connected and do the work? And that's, I think, in all of our relationships, the ones that are most meaningful, and it could be friendships, it could be family relationships, but
Yes.
are we invested in there, and are we committed, to do the work, and to be honest, and to be vulnerable, and to communicate when we're hurt and when we have a need. And that's just, the painful reality sometimes of any relationship worth having.
Yeah. And I appreciate it. You talked about, you and your wife being like, I'm trying to make her do something because it would be easier for me. My husband and I have been married, for many decades, and one area where we do things differently in many ways, but when you're trapped in a car, we drive very differently.
Yeah.
And that's another one of those. I have to accept that, how he drives is just perfectly fine. It's way slower than I would choose, and I would always be, and I'm sure I equally drive. So it isn't just that I have to accept him. He has to accept me too, because I'm sure I know for sure because we've had the conversation that my driving style drives him nuts, and we just have to go, we just drove, 4 hours the other day and we did it successfully and we didn't have any fights. And when one of us was driving, the other, gratefully kept their mouth shut about any kind of driving style stuff,
Yeah.
so that acceptance of like, this is, we're in a car together, it's moving forward. So,
Yeah, the other person doesn't have to be exactly like me or do things the same way I do, and I can accept that. But I think it's a regular reflective exercise we have to do, right? We have to get in the car, like, oh, that's right, I have to adjust my expectations and make some, adjustments here. Yeah.
yes, I'm sure there were a lot of adjustments on both sides on that one. So, okay,
Good.
so we've got some questions. Any tips on accepting endings? So to me, that sounds like the end of a relationship.
Yeah. Trying to
And
bring,
they type in yes. So yeah, accepting the end of a relationship.
yeah. So accepting the end. So it is a grieving process, right? And sometimes, even if it's the best thing for us, and we can be in an unwanted relationship ending, unwanted divorce, and we could be in like, you know what, I don't want it, but it's the best thing for me and for us. I think, there is grief. We just need to make room for the natural human response to loss. And if we've loved anybody at all, or we've shared life with them, even if we think of mostly it was negative or hurtful and, was betrayed, there are probably some good things in there. And we have to grieve the good and the bad and the painful and the things we were grateful for, sharing that portion of our lives with them. So I'd say grief, make sure you're allowing yourself to experience the full range of emotions, the sadness, the anger, the loss, the grief of lost time, and the grief sometimes of what I thought my life and my marriage or relationship was going to look like in the next 20, 50 years. Like there's a lot to grieve, past, present, and future. But I'd say being true to yourself, honoring yourself, is allowing yourself to experience and express, and hopefully with a safe person, a close friend or therapist, to express those emotions, share those emotions with them so they can guide you. So I'd say grief, and then helping, again, talking with someone can really help with this, but make sense of, what it was like, right? Again, what was good, what was difficult, what was harmful. In our relationships, we all contribute, sometimes the good and the bad. There things we have to look at, and was there it just helping us know, because if we don't look at our part and we just put it all on one person, even though, someone's actions, someone's behaviors, that's 100% on them. But if we skip over any part of how we might have contributed throughout the relationship, in a negative way, we might feel regret later if we're putting it all on that person now, and then later we're like, you know what, I didn't do this, or I could have done this, or maybe I tried to get us in counseling a decade ago, but it didn't work. So I would say look at the full picture, feel all the emotions, talk with somebody, and endings can be good, right? Endings in one can be a fresh start for the next stage of your life. It could be meeting new friends and just doing different things. So it is tough to look at the past and look at the present and then how the future can be different. But talk with people for sure, and feel the feelings, get support.
Yeah, and I'm typing. I posted because the next question is, where can we find the recording? And you can find that. I gave a specific link, but you could you can always find everything on Seeking Integrity. But Debbie McCrae did a previous webinar on grief. It was a two-part. It was because it was talking about the the stages of grief, and they're not linear. It isn't like, okay, good, I'm done with that one, and then you go. But if the relationship isn't over, like you said, couples are grieving losses together, and we have the couples healing from betrayal work group. So if they got Sex Addiction 101 work group that starts on Saturday, the couples healing, or the couples betrayed partner, no wait, the betrayed partner work group starts tonight, and then the couple starts again in April. But there's a lot of them. They're psychoeducation, they're not therapy. Many therapists suggest that you participate in these to help help further the work that you're doing with them. But for a coupleship to grieve the loss together, is, it's true. What you thought you had, what you had hoped for, all of those things, is part of it. When a relationship ends, anything, whether it's, the end of a relationship, the death of someone, I mean, whatever is ending, there's always grief, and not ignoring those feelings or trying to shove them up on a shelf. It's something to move through, not. Yeah, addicts are really good at compartmentalizing and going, like, not going to feel that one, it's unpleasant, so I'm going to go numb out over here. So giving yourself that grace that we were talking about a bit ago to to process through that, and giving yourself time and space. It's
Yeah,
it's a
and one
process.
thing that came to mind too, the book Necessary Endings, and I haven't looked at it to see completely if it's appropriate for betrayal, but
Okay.
if you've heard of Cloud and Townsend in the Boundaries series from decades ago, so Dr. Henry Cloud wrote Necessary Endings, and that one is about relationships. It could be about business and employees, different things, but when things have to end, and Dr. Cloud knows about boundaries. I'd say when things have to end, how do I still honor myself? How do I adjust through this transition? So that could be something to peek at, see if that book would be helpful for what you're going through.
And so the next question is the webinar. So I posted in the chat, but you could always find any of the webinars are recorded. The drop-in groups are not. Those work groups that I mentioned are not recorded. Those are live facilitated. So we have a plethora of offerings, in all different formats. So check those out, and you can always email me through the system if you've got questions on any of that. And so then the next question is, how do I learn to pause before responding? My reaction tends to go out before I even have the chance to think about it.
Yeah. So this is a good time to practice self-grace too, because if you are, I mean, any one of us needs to work on this, but if we're betrayed and we need to calculate how we say things, we can't always do that, right? It's like a trauma reaction. So there's a difference between reacting and responding. Sometimes we can slow things down, and sometimes the old count to 10 right before we say things can help us. But if we are activated and there's something stirred up in us instantly, it is difficult, and we can blame ourselves. We can be pretty harsh on ourselves for saying things we regret. So it is sometimes getting in that habit of just taking a deep breath. And I've had to do this, myself. And I asked myself this question: are the words that are going to come out of my mouth, are they going to help or are they going to harm? Because it usually is, especially if things are heated and I'm triggered, activated in some way, it's either going to be helpful or harmful. And usually if I have to ask myself that question, I better just keep my mouth closed, right? But sometimes if someone's doing something that's very painful for us, and we're looking at them and their facial expression, their actions or their behaviors or words is activating so many parts in us that is just so overwhelming, it's a rational, like, reasoning type of left brain exercise to slow down and try to articulate ourselves well in that moment. And so taking a deep breath starts to rest our nervous system, resets us a little bit. Sometimes we have to take a break for several minutes, maybe several hours, and come back to that conversation after we can process, after we get some space from it. So sometimes it's better to take a break. I've covered this on a previous webinar, the 7 steps for taking a break, so calling the break, coming back, but doing some things to care for yourself well, that calm you down, that help reset you and get you some space from what's going on that's overwhelming you. And then you might come back and share some of those feelings that you've learned, and you can tell your partner, when you said this is what happened to me, and I need you to stop saying that or stop doing that, or I need you to start doing this instead. So that is difficult. So think about the difference, reacting, responding. Reacting is usually spontaneous, impulsive. It's like right there, but we have to give ourselves that grace of, sometimes there's a lot coming at us. And then the responding is there's a pause. It's, we can think about things a little bit more, but if we can't even access that part of our brain that's going to help us deliver some kind, articulate words, we can't go there. We get that because we're going to blame ourselves. So we just have to kind of reset, calm ourselves, and then think about it with the proper part of our brains that will allow us to think through things.
Yeah, you mentioned, is it helpful or harmful? Well, I could go, well, it's helpful. I'm going to feel better because and so one of the things that I've learned in recovery is the serenity prayer. And the serenity prayer is, the wisdom to know the difference. And the only thing I have control over is my actions and reactions. And I have used that as a mantra, like, to get things back up to my executive brain instead of my reaction. I'll say the serenity prayer a couple of times before I say something. Sometimes it's helpful if I just take a couple notes, like, I'm hearing what they're saying, but I think it's really, what is the goal for this relationship, for this conversation, whatever, and like you said, if it's to be helpful, is there a way I can communicate my feelings, my thoughts, my whatever, in a way that isn't, angry or rageful? I know for sure for me that anger is especially deep anger, and that kind of raging stuff is always coming from a place of hurt, and it's the outward push. And so if I'm feeling hurt and I want to push back, is there a better way? Like you said, do I need to take a break? Do I need to step away, so that I can have a couple minutes to just, but to not react in that second, I mean, especially for somebody in addiction with impulse control issues, like, it is hard to, to learn, it's a skill set. But, I have done what I did initially is I started digging my fingernails into my fingers. I'm not kidding. This is silly, but it helped me. But like, it made me focus on this, on the nails in my hands. I haven't had to do this in a while, but it made me focus on that for, just so that it would interrupt the system. I mean, it was crazy, but it worked.
But
I'm not recommending everybody do that.
Right. But when we're angry, blood flows to our hands anyway, right? That's why people push a wall or they hit things. Like, there's blood flow actually going there. But I like how you said there's always something underneath that. There's the pain. So if we can tell ourselves that, what else am I feeling? So if you've ever heard of that iceberg, right? There's, on the surface, we see sadness, anger, anxiety, and there's, under the surface, there's probably a lot more room for rejection, abandonment, inadequacy, fear. And so if we ask ourselves what that person did or said or didn't do and should have done, it really activated something in me. What is this about? And a big thing too is, how do I need to get this important information to this person? And if I say it in an angry way or an attack or a criticism, they're not going to receive the message, right? They're going to be busy putting their guard up and doing their thing to defend themselves, which might be just defensiveness, right? It might be criticizing us back. It might be walking away and getting into avoidance. So if we really want them to understand this, we might have to walk away and say, I'm going to come back to this, and this is important. I'm going to journal it. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to talk about it with my therapist. And then I need to really communicate this feeling and this need in a way this person can receive it, because I really need this need to be met.
Yeah, I so appreciate that, because yes, if I want to be heard, I have to say it in a way that can be received, because otherwise it's just, words are coming up against each other, and no one's really being heard, and nothing is being done. I was talking to a couple yesterday, and I said, it's easy to get into the negative two-step where, you do this, I do this, you do this, I do this, and nothing changes, and it's not making progress in any way. So all of, like, the co-regulating you were talking about, like, if we want to be, if I want to be regulated, and I can help my partner regulate, so that we can have a conversation about that, something that's really important for me to convey and to be heard about, so we can have a discussion, not a back and forth, tit for tat. That's how we start to shift things, in a real and meaningful way.
Right. Exactly.
So the next person says, oh, this is my first time here. Great, glad you're here. And just wanted to say thank you. This is such a blessing you offer. So in addition to this, so on the Wednesday series, Alex is on the first Wednesday of the month, but then there's someone with a different topic, throughout the month. So you check out the schedule on Seeking Integrity. But there's also, I mentioned the drop-in groups. Those are free. There's a betrayed partner group today at 12:30 Pacific time, but there's a number of opportunities for betrayed partners, including like a men's betrayed partner group on Tuesday nights. There's a female sex and love addict group on Tuesday nights, but there's all kinds of different drop-in groups, specifically, for whatever you identify as, a betrayed partner or someone struggling with the compulsive behaviors. Those, again, are all moderated so that there's a safe person there. We, all of them are from a prodependent lens. So it's not codependency. That isn't a thing. Dr. Rob wrote books about, prodependence and why, it's a different lens to look, through. And then the work groups, those are, 6-week long psychoeducation courses, low cost, but those are a paid feature. So we've got lots of support for you on this journey. And good, I'm glad you're signed up for that too. Okay, here's one for you, Alex. How do you build intimacy that is not physical with an SA that only wants to be with me if I'm open to sex?
Yeah, that's conditional, right? They're saying, I only want to be with you if I'm open to sex. You might not be open to sex right now. It might be a while. So I would say, look at your needs, right? My need for safety is always primary. And if I don't feel safe engaging with my partner in sex, because for whatever reasons, if they're not in recovery, if they're not sober, if there's a chance of an STD, like different things like that, but even because it's more vulnerable and it can be triggering, if you're not ready yet, you're not ready. So that's why, like the 40 forms of intimacy, when sex is off the table, we need to look at other ways. So even the book, like if you look at the 40 forms and at the beginning of it, there is an inventory. So you can just rank like 1 to 5. What do you like out of these? And you can look at the book and say, these 5 or these 10 are very important to me. And this is a pathway to my heart. This kind of like the 5 love languages, right? This is speaking my language. And if you learn about these things, I'm going to be more open with you. I'm going to feel like you care about me, like you're making me a priority. And it's just not about the sex that you want from me. So do these things. And then maybe the partner reads the chapter on those that you selected. And like, these are the specific ways. At the end of each chapter, I have several connection points. Those are the practical things to put it in action. And so that your partner can actually read up on that and start to learn, hey, maybe I'm open to sex, but not today and not soon. So I want these other areas of our relationship to be developed. And I need to know that you see my needs and what I prioritize as healthy relationship activity. And it's not just about sex. Sex can come in later if you're okay with that and want that. And it could look very different. It could be amazing after there's honesty, after there's safety, after trust starts to build. But sometimes if it's just about the sex, we're not going to do anything. We're going to repeat some of those old patterns sometimes, and it isn't going to be mutually pleasurable and enjoyable. It'll look a lot like it used to, perhaps. And it's, we could create something brand new. We just sometimes have to take a break, have to reset and look at where else can we connect. And sex can actually be a lot better once these other areas we're giving attention to them.
Yeah, and as sex addicts often prove, sex is not intimate in a sex addict's world. It is about, the dopamine, it is intensity, it is all of those other things. And unfortunately, often partners feel like they are, part of the porn, or like they're just there playing a role, not connected in a real and meaningful way. So Alex has talked about, healthy boundaries, and yeah, a healthy boundary is you value you, you're holding that safe space for you. Dr. Rob talks all the time. Why would you want to have sex with somebody who isn't trustworthy or, isn't creating that safety? So there's a lot. What I hear is somebody that could probably really benefit from the Sex Addiction 101 work group that starts on Saturday, but a lot more work, for each and both of you to find, the good news is, as Alex and I are here to tell you, there is hope, for those that really lean into the recovery journey. Man, you can have a way better relationship, like Alex just said, even sexually, but that's just a piece of it, that than you could even imagine, but you have to be willing to do the work.
Yeah, and just comes to mind, Patrick Carnes wrote in Out of the Shadows, the core beliefs of a sex addict, and one of them is sex is my most important need. So until that changes and sex can be a part of a healthy relationship, and it's not just about me, it has to be other focused. It has to be couple focused. It can't be just self focused, so that hopefully in recovery that changes for your partner.
I agree. So we're out of time. Thank you so much. This recording will be posted on the website later today. So check it out. If you have any questions, Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com, and I'm happy to help. And Alex, it was great to see you. I will see you next month.
You too, Tammy. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Bye. Bye.